and welcome to Indus Special. I'm Meshal Malik. Now, Muslim women wearing the headscarf still continues to spark debate. We live in year 2019. We live in an age of individualism and freedom of expression. Yet, despite all of this, a piece of clothing still is seen to be a problem in Western and European spheres. Just a couple of days ago, the education minister in Quebec stated that Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, would only be fit to teach if she removed her headscarf. The minister's opinions were unfortunately not only his own. They reflected a controversial secularism bill passed earlier in Quebec, which bans Muslim women in positions of authority from wearing the hijab. This is just one example. For 181 years, Muslim women were banned from wearing the hijab in the U.S. Congress. This ban was uplifted in 2019. On tonight's show, we will take a closer look at why Muslim women continue to face restrictions on their right to wear what they want. We welcome to the show today Ms. Linda Hyokki, who's a senior research associate at the Center for Islamic and Global Affairs at Istanbul's Sabahattin Zaim University. She's joining us from Istanbul. We're also joined by Ms. Omiamah Zaman Khan, who's an activist joining us from London. Thank you both for joining us. Linda, let me begin with you. Now, when we talk about the headscarf, there are several notions at play here for the reason why Muslim women who wear them are discriminated against. Which reason do you think stands out the most?
Currently, what I hear from politicians mostly in these discussions is that either they are defending these bans on grounds of the war on terror, whereby they are basically equalizing the headscarf or the niqab with terrorism as a security threat, or they are also using the very old cliched argument of oppressed Muslim women and sort of trying to advocate this position that the European countries, the societies, the politicians, they are in position to sort of save these women from their own culture, from their own religion, from their families, from their male relatives who are oppressing them and forcing them to wear the headscarf or the face veil.
Right. And in this case, in the latter specifically, we value judgment that is being passed against Muslim women that for some reason they need saving, and this headscarf is a symbol of their oppression. Omiamah, what would you like to add to that conception that this hijab is oppressing women?
There are many factors. It's not that just one integral part that just for the sake of stating that Muslims women are backward or they are facing oppression here in Europe. The point is there are major other factors. For example, from thousands of years there has been a patriarchal class system here in our whole world. And that is taking a toll right now. We have learned from history that we have never learned from history. Let's go to the 15th century when Catholic in Spain, they did not recognize Jewish and they were oppressing in the same manner. So right. I think that the narrative and rhetoric is being built. It's not a clothing or it's not the headscarf, but it is the identity and multiculturalism which is affecting these people, I think.
Right. But we also see that in this age of when feminism movements are gaining momentum, not just in Western spheres, in European spheres, in Southeast Asia here, in South Asia here, still this concept that the Muslim women here still need to be liberated by perhaps women who know better seems to prevail when they continuously say that this headpiece, this scarf is something that needs to be fought against and Muslim women just don't know any better. Is that something you would agree with?
No, not at all, because look, there are prominent people, like we have Linda right now sitting with us. She's wearing a headscarf. She's intellectual. She has her freedom and she's speaking out for us. It is not the headscarf which is the issue. It's the identity which is becoming a threat, that when there is no way out, people, the far right wing, they are trying to exploit an agenda, a propaganda against the whole Muslim community, let's say like that, and they're just bringing a narrative, building up a narrative against us. There's nothing, I don't think somebody living nearby me or my neighbor would have any issue what I'm wearing with, right? So it's just a narration to gain attention.
Right.
This is how the world moves.
Right. Linda, but it seems like this narrative has been building for a long time. Maybe it never stopped being built, and it's just resuming with greater momentum with the rise of the right wing. But we do see, as I mentioned before as well, that in the U.S. itself, before Ilhan Omar stepped in as the first congresswoman wearing the headscarf, it was banned. So this had enough time to be rethought out and to be acted upon, and still it wasn't. Why do you think there is so much inertia regarding how freedom of expression of Muslim women is being stifled?
One of the problems that we have here is actually the fact that we don't hear the Muslim women's voices in this discussion. All these legislations that are being done in the parliaments, in the national during the national parliamentary debates, they are basically based on certain assumptions by these politicians and not on empirical evidence. There is enough research that has been done in Europe about Muslim women who are wearing the headscarf, who are wearing the face veil, for instance, about their motivations to do so, and it's and this research shows that the women do it out of their own free will.
Right.
And hence the question needs to be asked: why is it that the politicians are still advocating this this discourse of non-autonomous Muslim women? Just like my colleague said, actually, I do agree that at the end of the day, it is just about building up an identity that is, they need to build their own identity on one hand, as this enlightened Western Judeo-Christian society in which they are, they have been living for thousands of years. And then on the other hand, the Muslim citizens are pictured as the racial, cultural, religious others. And yeah, that's
right.
Basically the game.
Right. And Omiamah, as Linda pointed out here, that they want to build this identity of being the enlightened civilization, and they have to take out those who are oppressed out of their oppression. But with enlightenment and with liberalism, wouldn't there be values of acceptance of those who do want to have a different identity? But we seem to see that in Europe specifically, there seems to be an attack on multiculturalism.
According to a few American think tanks here, it's like that 2050, right now, like in France or in Germany or in UK, there's a significant amount of Muslim population rising, and it will take another significant number will reach to a higher extent. So yes, one factor is that. Another factor is that the narration in let's say that they are going into pre-Renaissance age, that where they say that dark ages when the enlightenment concept was not there, and let's suppress them and let's not speak them. But however, only the headscarf is not the issue here. It's LGBT, other let's say issues are even rising here. So yeah, multiculturalism is something which is not being taken so much openly right now in the political arena of Europe.
Right. But why do you think that increasingly, while there is more acceptance and there is a greater power given to those in terms of the LGBT community, many other minorities, there seems to also be this opposite, stronger reaction to it? Don't you think that while there are more rights given, there should be greater acceptance as well?
Exactly, there should be. The thing is that this is not how the world is being structured. The liberalism is there, but the liberalism is only on the face to sell the product. For example, the burkini issue, which happened in France, which is taking like a huge debate there. So it's like the cops are there on the beach and telling people to take off their tops. Now, when people are forced or women are forced to do that, which organizations do that? Daesh or ISIS or such organizations do that. And on French beach, when cops are standing and telling a hijabi woman to take off the top of burkini, which is a modest swimsuit. So the idea is that yes, there's less tolerance and people need something to buy. The liberal idea is what people want to address to, but then again there is a difference.
Right. Omiamah, hold on to that thought. I want to introduce our guest who's joined us, Ms. Maliha Husain, who's an activist joining us from the Islamabad studios. Thank you so much, Ms. Husain, for joining us. Now, while we're talking about liberalism, let's just take a step back. Let's define what liberal values should mean and what should they mean in context of what we're talking about, the hijab.
Liberal values. I think we need to look at liberalism more in the context of humanism. What does it actually mean? Conservativeness as opposed to being liberal. Considering human beings as equal, considering them all to be this, not same, they are different, but they are equal. Having progressive thoughts about men and women and transgenders and all the different forms of sexual identities of people, considering them to be equal and giving them space to live their lives the way they want to, not suppressing anyone, not allowing people to where we don't allow them to come out of their houses, where we don't allow them to get a good education, where we don't allow them to choose a career for themselves. So looking at human beings as equal and allowing them to live their lives the way they want to.
Right.
As long as they're not hurting anyone.
Right.
Creating the space in the society where they can practice their beliefs.
Right. Ms. Husain, while we're talking about this, and you mentioned equality here. Now, when, especially in France, one of the reasons why burkini was allowed to be banned was that it does not allow equality to both the sexes. Now, do you see a problem with that argument?
When you are in a public place, when you are if you want to swim in a public pool, there is a proper attire. If you want to go to an office, you need to dress up in a certain way. If you're going to your mosque or to your church, temple, you wear certain.
Ms. Linda, do you agree with that there should be a proper attire that people need to follow, and therefore it's fine to ban certain items of clothing because they just don't fit the description?
No, I definitely do not agree with this. As my colleague just mentioned, if we are understanding liberalism as promoting individualism and everybody's freedom of expression and freedom to wear what they want as long as it does not harm anyone, then definitely there is no reason why Muslim women should be forbidden to wear the burkinis, because it does not harm anyone. And this is also one of the reasons why we have to critically undermine these bans, because there has been no empirical evidence that has been brought forth about the harmfulness of the face veil or the hijab or the burkini on the women, and it has nothing to do with equal opportunities. In Europe, people can walk on the streets, with whatever clothes they like. There are different styles of clothes. We have the punks, we have the hippies, we have the rockers, we have the modern clothing following H&M and all these other fashion stores. So. Yes, summa summarum, I have to say, I do not agree with this.
And it seems that something such as the burkini would actually, in fact, allow greater inclusion of women as opposed to for them to be marginalized or for them to be isolated, because it allows them to be involved in public spaces. Now, with the heat wave going on, if Muslim women do want to go to the beach in wearing something that they feel comfortable and feel like it aligns with their values, that shouldn't be infringed upon. That's a right that shouldn't be infringed upon. Omiamah, we're talking a lot about about how this right is being violated. But what are the justifications for why it's okay for it to be violated?
When the mayors of France, they imposed this ban on burkini, they had a wide range of reasons, which they said. One was the hygiene issue. The second was that they said that for maintaining the public order and right now the threat and security and terrorist attacks. So they said that because the idea which France stands on after post-French Revolution was the idea of laicity. Laicity is secularism. Right, so they are based on that issue. So they have, they've picked up that point. On the other hand, as the other French people, like this was the statements of mayors, which is if you look one of the most prominent television channel, which is French 24, you'll find all the narratives coming from there and the public. But the other hand, the other group is stating that it's a symbol of religious extremism, and we don't find them as part of ours. Now this is very funny because there has been a colonial history of France in North Africa, and the descendants, which are Muslim, are Arabs and North Africans. They are not the migrant, the recent migrant. They're living from generations one by one. So yes, the idea which they are posing, and which is rhetorically and narratively to give the logic is right, is laicity. Now, on the other hand, when they talk about laicity and secularism and freedom of right and expression and all that goes on, then why not they can allow a simple burkini? What's the threat,
Right.
So, yes, the debate is constant and it's balanced.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Omiamah Khan, and giving us insight into this. Linda, continuing on from this point, what do you think needs to change in the debate, in the conversation, for it to have a more holistic overview, for people to come on the same page and take this discussion forward? Because this is a recurring debate. Again and again, we talk about the same thing. But what needs to happen to change and find a solution?
I cannot emphasize more on this issue of hearing the Muslim women's voices. I genuinely feel that our voices are not heard enough. We are not given enough, space to express our opinions and our true motivations behind our sartorial practices in Europe. Most importantly, what hurts here is that while the politicians are arguing that Muslim women are oppressed and they have no agency, they are themselves not giving the Muslim women any agency or autonomy when they are not listening to our stories. And This is something that definitely needs to be changed, because otherwise it's just like laws made upon people without asking the people themselves what they really need. And yeah.
Right. Do you think it's redundant to have these debates if in one part of the world Muslim women aren't treated at the same level as they should be, which of course they have rights and they should be respected? But do you think it's redundant to have this debate of how Muslim women are being discriminated or infringed upon because of this precise reason?
No, I do not think so, because as activists, as scholars, I am sure that all of us share the same values, and if we are advocating the freedom of choice for women and the agency, then obviously all of us at the same time advocate the freedom of choice to cover, but also to uncover. And I wouldn't wait for any other countries to change their laws or their mentalities or their traditions until I can go and fight for the justice in other contexts. I think there is enough of activists and scholars around the world to do these things at the same time, and I believe that with enough efforts and with enough energy, we can work towards something good, so that women will be liberated all over the world.
Right. And when we talk about the age of feminism and how these movements are spreading different continents, isn't it true that there are different battles being fought in different places, in different contexts? And we can't really equate one to the other and say, if this is not happening here, then we shouldn't fight for these rights elsewhere.
That's what I said just before. Also, my country has other problems with women as well. I mean, there is lots of domestic violence going on generally in the European contexts. So I do think that there are enough fights to fight for.
Right. Ms. Maliha, so how do you see going forward with this? How do you feel like Muslim women and women all over the world should be involved in decision making and their voices should be heard? How do you think progression should take place in this regard?
I think when we talk about Muslim women, it's not just Muslim women, it's women in general, no matter which religion they belong to, that are discriminated against. You know, we're always talking about gender discrimination. It's women who are paid less around the globe. It's women who generally get beaten up at home. It's women mostly who get sexually harassed. It's not 100%. Men also get beaten up and abused and get sexually harassed. But it's majority of the women, not necessarily Muslim women. So again, I'll say the same thing, that it's very important that we consider all human beings to be the same and equal, not same, but equal. Right. They're different, but they are equal. And we need to start looking at them as equals and treating them as equals, no matter which religion they belong to. And, you know, that covers Muslim women also. They have their rights and they need to be able to exercise their rights.
Right. On that thought, Ms. Husain, hold on to stay with us. We're also joined by Ms. Aesha Awan, who's an activist joining us from Australia. Thank you so much, Ms. Aesha, for joining us. Now, we've been talking a lot about how women need to be more involved and their voices need to be heard. Let's talk about politics and women's participation in the political realm. How do you think that's evolving, and how do you think participation of women is increasing in these spheres?
I think political participation of women is increasing around the world. In Australia, we've seen where we had 20 members of parliament in 2000 to almost 40% of parliament is women. I think when you don't have women in politics, you don't have women's voices heard. And so issues like, you know, gender pay gap, sexual harassment, sexual assault, these things don't get heard. So you need women at the table for women's rights and women's issues to be heard and addressed.
Right. And as Ms. Husain was earlier talking about, it's not just one group of women, but it's all women who should get representation. So in that sense, when we're talking about women of color and women coming from other countries, how is their representation increasing, if it is at all?
The representation is increasing so slowly. There's still a lot of room to go. In Australia, for instance, we've just elected our first female Muslim senator, Marine Faruqi. And that means that there's someone visibly there for not only the Muslim community to see, but the white community and the rest of Australian community to see us in these political positions of doing the good work that we're doing, which allows for there to be space created for more women of color to come in and do some of that work as well.
Right. And Ms. Linda, we're talking about how women of different areas, of different, let's talk, when we're talking about intersectionality in this case, that facing double discrimination, not just being a woman, but being a woman of color and a woman of race. Do you see that with the right-wing discrimination against these women is increasing, or do you think that there is a move forward in this regard?
No, I definitely do agree that with the rise of the far right movement, discrimination of women is increasing. I mean, the whole act of fear mongering that is going on in European politics at the moment, it just fuels these sentiments of hate. And if there is, let's say, a woman of color on the streets, let's say with the headscarf, obviously this woman, she could get harassed most probably. If she removes her headscarf, she could still get harassed because she's a foreigner. So then we move from Islamophobia to xenophobia, sort of. Right. If me as a white woman, if I remove my headscarf, nobody notices me, you know. So yeah, definitely, it's not that simple.
But still, amidst all of this discrimination, there are women just like you who still continue to use the headscarf, who continuously defy what society's oppression is, and they continuously move forward. But what is the discrimination they have to face in terms of the workplace, in terms of their social spheres? What exactly happens? What are the repercussions?
Yes, I mean, first of all, many women complain that they don't get into job interviews when they send their applications. It's not even necessarily about the fact that if you put a photo on your CV that they would see that you are a woman with a headscarf or a woman of color. But if they see a name, let's say it's an Arabic sounding name, that right. Already for many employers, that's like a no-go. Second of all, what I find always very it's just gross is this, epistemic racism sort of where our opinions are not even taken seriously. Like if we speak up for our own rights, and if we try to explain to people, why are we doing this? Why are we covering? Why are we being religious? Why do we even care about religion? What most of the times comes out as a counter argument is that we are brainwashed and we don't know what we're saying, and that sort of stuff. So I think this is also very dangerous because sometimes it feels like we fight for our rights, but we are not even given the space to actually being taken seriously.
Right. Aesha, why do you think this notion continuously exists, that those who are practicing faith, those who belong to a certain culture are brainwashed?
I think the notion comes from the idea that, especially when we think of the hijab issue, that Muslim women don't have agency, that Muslim women aren't making these choices themselves, that they're somehow being oppressed by Muslim men to wear hijabs, which is just not the case, especially in the West, where most Muslim women who wear the hijab are doing so because it is a symbol of faith. It is really quite important to them. And I think this notion comes around because it's just Muslim people are seen as having less agency, I suppose. And also the demonization of Islam, with a lot of Islamophobia we have in the West. It kind of plays into this idea of if someone's wearing this hijab, either they're oppressed or, they're going to do something bad and they don't align with Western values and they don't,
Right. On that note, thank you so much, Ms. Aesha, for joining us and talking to us. We're going to take a short break. When we return, we're going to continue our discussion. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special while we continue our discussion. Now, before going to break, we were talking about the fact that Muslim women are seen to have internalized certain things, and that's why they don't have agency and they're brainwashed. Linda, to that question, I want to ask you something that rises quite often, actually, is the concept of internalized misogyny and what that really means, women not actually knowing whether or not they are operating within a patriarchal system and whether or not they have agency. Could you just shed light on that?
I don't even know if there is much to say to that, like in terms of what it means, because it's just basically undermining anybody's capability of thinking for themselves. The thing is that if Muslim women choose to dress in a certain way, if they consciously do that, even be it in a religious framework, then they should be able to do so, because as we have discussed before, here we are talking about matters that do not harm other people.
Right.
Even though the argument is oftentimes brought that that the headscarves are a threat to the society, or the face veils are a threat to the society because they are sort of advocating an Islamization. But that's obviously just a nonsense discussions.
Right. And on that point, thank you so much, Ms. Linda Hyokki, for joining and talking to us. Now we're joined by Ms. Khirad Siddiqui, who's a psychologist joining us from Nevada. Thank you so much, Khirad, for joining us. Now, when we're talking about oppression, persecution, or marginalization, the concept of otherizing or demonizing someone always rises, whether it's men doing it to women or a specific community doing it to another community. Take us through this and how these notions are created and how they're dispelled.
Sure. Thank you for having me. So this whole notion of otherizing, I think, is really important and really central to what you're talking about. And I think a lot of that comes from, if we're talking about Muslim women specifically in the West, specifically things concerning visibility and invisibility. We talk a lot about Muslim women and, stereotypes surrounding them in terms of submissiveness and these kind of dual roles that they have to take on. But a lot of those stereotypes come from the kind of invisibility that Muslim women take up in broader Western society. And there's a lot of research that also shows that the more visible or invisible people or any kind of group is perceived to be in a society, the easier it is to otherize them, right? Because it's less likely that you're going to be encountering them daily. And then even if you, even in terms of media representation, the less you see them, the less you have to think about them and afford them the kind of basic rights that you would give to any other member of society.
Right. And Ms. Husain, following from that, in your work as an activist, how do you see this otherization manifesting and then causing violence and also persecution? Any group?
It happens globally, but it does not only happen to Muslim women. It happens to women of color, even though I hate using this term. What does it even mean, women of color and women without color? But women coming from diverse backgrounds, it does not only happen to Muslim women, it happens to women from, say, African countries and Middle Eastern countries and from Far East countries. So it's the differences or the diversity that is not accepted. Instead of, like, right now we are only focusing on Muslim women and how they are treated, but it's not only Muslim women, it is women who are different or people who are different that are treated differently. You know, if we start looking at our different identities other than religion, it'll be very easy for people to connect with one another. And the more people, the different people that you're able to connect with, because of the different identities that you recognize within yourself, the other keeps getting smaller. If you only look at yourself as Muslim women and how you are treated, the other is great. But if you identify or if you find other identities within yourself, you are a mother, you might be a teacher, you might be a sports person or somebody who loves sports, and you start connecting with other people based on your other identities other than your religion, I think the other will become smaller and it will not remain an issue.
Right.
We focus so much on Muslim women and how they dress. So they, of course, become isolated and the society does not accept them because of the way we behave with other women. And you know, when we're talking about the clothes of Muslim women and hijab and abaya or burkini, as long as they don't cover their faces, it's not as much of an issue. But when they cover their faces, which is actually not even, they're not asked to do that in the religion. When they go to perform Hajj or Umrah, they are not supposed to cover their face.
Right.
Their hair, yes, the rest of the body, yes, but they can show their hands, they can show their face.
Ms. Husain,
so, you know, as long as it's not a security threat.
If we take religion out of this debate, as you were saying just now, let's talk about women in general and how you mentioned even sportswomen, they get discriminated against, and women of color from different races, they get discriminated against. Let's talk about women as a whole. What happens and what allows for them to continuously still be at the end of unequal pay gaps, for them to be discriminated at work, from positions of authority, from them being discriminated against climbing up the ladder? What's justifying that continuously in this modern day society, globalized society?
It's basically patriarchy. We live in a patriarchal society, and all countries in the world today have patriarchal systems. And in a patriarchal society, men have a higher status. women are at a lower status. So irrespective of everything else, because we live in patriarchal societies, women being looked at a lower status, they are discriminated against. And discrimination of women should not be looked at as an issue of women. It is actually an issue of the society. So if we want to do something to change the status of almost half the population of this world, we, men, women, transgenders, everybody need to start looking at our own belief systems. How do we treat women in our households? How do we treat women in our societies? If somebody is educated, intelligent, capable, they should be paid the same. They should be considered for different jobs, irrespective of everything else. If hiring is based on merit and not based on whether the person or the applicant is a man or a woman, things will start changing. But we all need to start looking at patriarchy, patriarchal, traditional gender roles, and how it impacts different segments of the society,
Ms. Husain,
especially women.
Hold on to that point while I also ask Ms. Khirad, while we're talking about the patriarchal structure, there are many studies that show that women who do have potential of success often underestimate themselves. These studies are taken off between female and male students. Now, what are some of the other repercussions of living in this society and women are come to believe that they don't deserve something or that they're not equal to men?
Right. I think you bring up some really good points there. And this is in talking about previous things that we've talked about in terms of internalized misogyny and women growing up in this patriarchal society that definitely was not made for them. It becomes much more difficult for them to often believe in their potential, even when it's very great, especially as compared to male peers. But I think one thing that's really important to note in discussions like these is that even in terms of women not believing in their potential, a lot of things like you're talking about workplace discrimination, right? And the repercussions that can have. A lot of those systems were made specifically for men. Especially if we're talking about in the West, the way that we think about leadership is very much a patriarchal system of thinking about leadership, very top down and hierarchical. And so oftentimes it's not even a matter of women not fully believing themselves, which of course there is research that shows that they tend to underestimate their abilities when it comes to men. But even in thinking about things like negotiating salaries and things like that, it's really often also a matter of the fact that those systems are made and catered toward male employees rather than thinking about the way that women often approach situations like these, often more empathetically, thinking more about group dynamics and group situations. So I think it is a matter of thinking of both of those things. And of course, yes, this has really severe repercussions, but I think it's really important how we phrase that question instead of placing a lot of the blame on women kind of underestimating themselves, also thinking about the ways that system is structured to favor men and male styles of leadership and advancing in career fields, all kinds of fields, really.
Right. And Ms. Khirad, you make a very important point, and on that, I'd like to end the show. Thank you so much, Ms. Khirad Siddiqui, for joining us and talking to us. Thank you, Ms. Maliha Husain, for joining us. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We will see you again tomorrow with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.